I totally just bumped my elbows trying to sit down. Hi! I'm having some charcuterie. Welcome. This is my second edition of what it's like as someone who's late diagnosed. I got a lot of really great feedback from the last, video that I did. I was kind of at a place of just being so completely gutted. I just wanted to sit down and kind of talk about what the process is like for you. The last one was more about diagnosis and what that process is like. Diagnosis is not a guarantee. It's not necessarily necessary. It doesn't necessarily fit with what your needs are. What do you do besides that? What do you do then? What do you do with that information? However old you are, I'm 40. It's kind of this mind-blowing sort of experience, at least it has been for me. I felt very lonely with this information when I first started out. Don't do Google searches for support. Like I've said before, it's kind of scary what you get back. I feel like the search engines should know me well enough to not do that to me, but they still do anyway. So even if you've informed the searches, chances are you're still going to get some traumatizing results. I just wanted someone to sort of explain to me what it was gonna be like. I guess a support group or something where a bunch of us could just talk about this massive realization that we had in our lives and how it impacts your life, because it does, and it impacts the people in your life too. So let's talk about that. This is not going to be short form. If you know of more information or good resources, please link them in the comments or talk about them in the comments. Totally open to more autistic and ADHD people sharing their personal experiences, just trying to be collectively supportive for each other. That doesn't seem to happen a lot for some weird reason, and I think it's partly because society just sort of shames the heck out of these behaviors and the way that we are, and so it's well, why would we talk about it? I think the more we talk and the more we share, I just think it's really important, and I think communal healing is actually really, really important, and it's not prioritized enough. All right, let's get started. So the first thing that happened when I really was sure, right, and that can be, self-diagnosing or not, was that I started to have flashbacks to all of these things that had happened in my life, but I was seeing them through this lens. I actually realized that a lot of the ways that I had been treated were not my fault. You have a lot of realizations of just how much the things that are just part of who you are were shamed, disliked, reprimanded, and just overall discouraged in your life. And that can be coming from, it pretty much comes from everywhere. Being a parent now, you see a lot of the strategies that are used for children, especially my generation or my parents' generation, just you realize are kind of not okay for who you are. That takes a lot out of you. I got very, very angry. So angry. There was a lot of anger and a lot of grief. Everything. It was just very angsty and just I can't believe that this has been what I've had to deal with. I can't believe that all of this happened. And the longer you go undiagnosed, or the longer you don't have this information, the harder that is, because you have more of those experiences. That's kind of was the first stage where I was just really mad, and that lasted for a long time. And I just want you to know, it's totally normal, and I feel like they don't adequately prepare you for that. But a lot of it's also can be internalized in the body, and so I experienced a lot of shaking and chills and very visceral reactions to just sort of my body processing the words for what I'd gone through as a kid and then later on in life. And I just want you to know that you're not a bad person if you're freaking out a lot. Society prioritizes this concept that we can all gain the skills to control our emotions and our reactions to everything, and anyone who is outside of that gets kind of stuck with the label of like not healed enough, not enough, not mature, a bad person. And that was really hard to deal with because I didn't have necessarily the tools to understand my body experienced trauma and was just releasing that trauma. I did have a therapist. It may not be that useful to you because a lot of therapy is focused on a neuronormative concept that like your brain is not wired for. As someone who was in therapy for a very long time, a lot of the help that I got wasn't actually helpful. And of course I internalized that as a failure too on my part, because that's basically what we're wired to believe, is that every time we don't exist in a neuronormative fashion, i.e. having a meltdown, getting overstimulated, freaking out, a lot of these things we internalize as just sort of really bad, like we're really bad people, and we need to hide that from everyone. And that segues into the second topic, which is masking. I feel that based upon the culture that you are raised in, the various communities that you are a part of, the word for masking can be different. It can look very different. But in my case, there was just a part of me that realized that in order to compensate for everyone telling me that I'm a bad person every time I lose control, my answer was to control myself all of the time, completely construct this facade of not caring, not getting overstimulated. If you feel anything, don't show it at all. Just smile, be happy. That was a recipe for disaster. Once I realized that I'd been doing that, I kind of went completely in the opposite direction and was like, okay, well, I don't know why I'm doing anything at all then. Like, if everything was motivated, everything about myself, everything I was doing, everything I was thinking, everything that I was like this made up thing to please everybody. I like kind of had an identity crisis, and I was like, what the heck, who am I then? And I think a lot of that resulted in not doing anything. So like not showing emotion, not talking to people, just not expressing myself at all, just like hiding up in my room. And I didn't know what to do, right? Because once you have this information, you're like, everything I've been doing is a lie. And I want you to be kind to yourself, okay? Because you developed these strategies, these coping strategies, because there was a need. Please understand that you are not a bad person either because you chose to mask in order to survive in a society that didn't accept who you were. Because you can fall into that, because trust me, I kept trying to find all the things that were wrong with me and fix them, and I realized that's part of what my life had been. Like, oh, you have this bad thing about yourself and you need to figure out any possible way to stop it, which was unsuccessful because it's a part of who I am, how my brain is wired. And that's not to say that I don't have responsibility for who I am and its impact on other people, but we will get there. That's at the very end. So yeah, with the masking, there's a moment where you realize you don't have an identity, or you don't know what your identity is, because the longer that you have been, you've totally, completely abandoned your identity for the sake of pleasing everyone because they don't like you and they've told you that you're bad. The longer that happens, the more you kind of start to lose grip on who you are. And that can be almost like the floor has fallen out from underneath you. I don't remember which creator it was, but like I saw something from a creator that was just so beautiful, where they sort of talked in a poetic way about the fact that it's almost like Alice falling down the rabbit hole, because you had solid ground and all of a sudden you are just falling, and that can be really disorienting and really scary, and that can also make you feel like you're not safe, cause a lot of anxiety. It's a lot. I just stopped doing anything that I thought was motivated by trying to be someone else. Not entirely, because like you have to go out in public still. I have 2 children, I gotta take them to the dentist, I gotta do stuff like that. And so, you know, I would still fall into and slip into, you know, that persona that I was used to, because like what else was I gonna do? Not talk to people at all? Like that doesn't really work. But for the most part, that's when I started to say, well then who am I then? You can't just say, okay fine, I'll just stop, because you don't have anything else that's there. And so I really started kind of exploring like, okay, well then what do I really actually need? What do I actually really like? And who am I? Then all of a sudden, all these like new identities start to emerge. Some of which are like, what? No, wait, what? It was really surprising to see that, like, you know, we start out with like CPTSD, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, you're also ADHD and autistic. And it's like, okay, that's new information. And then it's like, okay, but do you know what your gender is? Do you actually know what your sexuality is? And so it's interesting that once you start to have this recognition of, oh, there's like this external set of standards that you've been trying to emulate or meet or whatever, then all of a sudden your brain starts to think, what's the point of these standards? Are they actually what my standards are? And what are my standards? That can be a lot of change. That's also scary for people who are autistic, especially. It's been a ride. Let me just tell you, it's been a ride. I love the fact that I keep finding out new things, and I love the fact that it's okay to do that. I finally have like the permission to figure it out or not figure it out if I don't want to. Like some things about my identity are undefined, and I'm happier with that. That part is kind of fun, but also a little unsettling. And then on top of it, all this masking impacts all of the relationships that you had prior. People in your life have formed attachments to you based upon who you were, and you're not that person anymore. And so that kind of creates a little friction. There's that too. Sometimes I guess people realize that their relationships like aren't what they want them to be. Sometimes they realize that they don't want to be in these relationships anymore. Sometimes the friendships we were trying to seek just don't make sense anymore with who we are now. And I feel like that's, you know, pretty common for friendships in general, just the transient nature of them, that as we change, they change, people come and go. That can be also very jarring to those of us who are autistic or ADHD. The friendships we've been trying to build don't make sense anymore. We really tend to not have a lot of friends. That can be really hard. I wish I could tell you that all of this happened because I wanted it to. Like, it happened because it no longer became sustainable anymore to exist in my old ways. I ended up becoming very highly reactive. That means that I was melting down a lot more. I was sensitive a lot more. My auditory processing, like sensitivities, just got really, really bad. And so I have to wear headphones all the time now, to the point where I didn't even realize that I was in a state of reactivity or activation or whatever you want to call it, overstimulation all the time, so much. I couldn't even have conversations with my partner without like freaking out. Part of that was also because I didn't even realize that I was in that all the time. That created a lot of tension between us, and has for 2 years now. I would think, okay, I need to figure out a way to calm down, but because of the way my brain is wired, that was going to be impossible to do alone. The same thing happened in a lot of my friendships. I got very reactive, didn't realize I was being reactive, or like knew for a second that I was getting triggered, but I didn't know how to pull myself out of it. I didn't understand that I couldn't pull myself out of it because it's a meltdown. It just didn't occur to me, in fact, until recently, when a friend of mine just said, like, who's also autistic, like, you can't just stop melting down. Once your body is on that pathway, it's gonna do its thing, but we can be regulated by others. That was kind of like a big moment of like, oh my gosh, I've been trying this whole time to try to get it together by myself because those are the standards we have in this society, when in reality I truly actually do need community to help me get out of it. The thing is though, is that I didn't actually know this information to be able to convey it to the people that I needed to help me. That is unfortunately the case for a lot of people who are autistic and are dealing with this, especially late diagnosed, because people have seen you a certain way for 40 years. They don't know that you're not capable of pulling yourself out of a meltdown. Society tends to still label that as a character flaw, a moral inadequacy, and that we're wrong people. So of course they're not going to be, saying, oh, people need help to get out of these things. This actually resulted in a lot of fights and me just sort of running away from those things because I was feeling so guilty and so ashamed of myself and how I was behaving, because I still thought that these things were character flaws. And I was like, well, if I'm gonna keep doing this to people, then I just shouldn't be in their life then, because I don't want to hurt them and I don't want them to be mad at me. Still in my family, and that was pretty much it. Wasn't really interacting with a lot of people, and I wasn't seeking out, local friendships. Haven't been for 2 years. I've been trying to stay social. I have ADHD and whatever, I'm an extrovert, so I definitely still crave it, but it was scary because I constantly was thinking I'm gonna blow up and these people aren't gonna like me anymore, which is a theme through my whole life. So yeah, I was isolated, not seeking help, not understanding how I could seek help, not realizing I needed to seek help, and I keep having these massive reactions to things and I don't know what to do about it. And that led to burnout. So basically, pretty much any burnout is essentially expectations for what you do are too high and not enough recognition, which is hard to get when you are isolated or if people don't understand how you're functioning and why you're freaking out. That happened. Burnout is a real trip. I just would wake up some days and just be like, I don't want to do anything. I want to be a pile of rocks. I want to be a pile of rocks. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do anything. I didn't want to give anybody anything. I didn't want anybody to ask me for anything. I was just so pushed past my limit and fed up and just so completely unable to do anything, even things for myself. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't feeding myself regularly. I wasn't, there was a lot of burnout and just laying quietly by myself in my bed. And it's interesting because those sound a lot like depression, and it might possibly have been a little bit of depression, but it's interesting because burnout and depression can look very similar. This was more just my entire life kind of being a lie and having to be pushed past my limits and my needs and who I was at every moment. And it just kind of culminated in this well, screw it then. I don't want to do anything. I drastically reduced everything that I had to do. Drastically. Which was good, because at that point, I could then sit and say, we're just gonna do, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say you don't or you can't do that. And when I finally gave myself permission, got permission, we should and can say no, that we have permission to say, I cannot, I'm not capable of this right now. And of course, that brought up, the whole burnout situation brought out a lot of my internalized ableism and internalized capitalism and this whole concept of you're not a worthy person if you aren't producing something constantly. If you are not capable of doing things, then that makes you less than, when in reality, that was my body saying, you can't do these things and you need to rest. You're not going to be able to do them if you don't rest. And the necessity of rest and how rest is a sort of rebellion. I still regress into burnout because I'm still sorting out what I'm actually capable of and allowing myself to be okay with me setting boundaries around what I'm actually capable of versus pushing myself all the time and then creating all these resentments and getting mad at people and them having no idea because I'm still responsible for my feelings. I started reading books about boundaries too. There's a great book by Dr. Nedra Tawwab, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Wonderful book about, really understanding what your limits are in here, what your standards are in here. And again, it's about finding more of like what your identity is and who you are and operating by that versus what everyone else is expecting you to do, because they have no idea what's going on in here a lot of the time. So yeah, that's my big, long spiel. I wouldn't say that I'm completely out of it either. I'm going to regress. I'm going to go through all the various different stages of grief because I have. This is a grieving, angering moment in your life if you have this information. So if I had any advice for me as I was going through this process, I think I would first say read some books, check out some books. I'm gonna link some in the description for the ones that I read that were really, truly remarkable. I listened to some of them on audiobook form, which is totally okay, and then I did all of my sewing while I was listening, so totally do that if you want. Work on what your identity is. Be compassionate with yourself. Explain or try to find a way to explain to people you care about what's going on with you. But you don't have to over-explain. I did that, and it was really actually quite confusing for a lot of people. You don't have to keep trying to convince people of why you need the things you need. You don't need to keep convincing people that you actually are what you are. What I mean by explaining is being like, here's what I need, and this thing is happening to me right now, and this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I'm going through. If you can, find ways to take time, space, and do less work to just be this for a little while, because you will get back to things that you care about and you really like. You're not gonna be in this forever. I thought so. It's very easy to feel that way. Some of these feelings are very intense, but you don't have to be in this forever. Figure out what you like and what you love and the things you want in your life. You can't really rush this process. You may want to because some parts of it feel crappy. If you rush it, you're not gonna get there. As someone who held on too tightly to several different ideas or feelings or trying to fix things or trying to get somewhere better, I suggest that you be kind to yourself and realize that you can't really progress until you're ready to progress. When I say progress, I don't mean get better, fix yourself, heal everything up. I mean, healing isn't, to me, about trying to become a better version of yourself. It's about seeing clearly who you are and being cool with that. So try not to bring capitalism into your healing process too. And then I think also find safe people that you can regulate with. So a lot of the people that I was friends with or I wanted to be friends with were neuronormative and actually just weren't able to provide me with the type of understanding and regulating tools that I needed from people who are neurodivergent. So don't be afraid to go seek out people like that and seek out groups of people like that where they do actually understand what is that you deserve to exist as yourself. and you can. I guess that's the thing I didn't really think about. I really was in quite a really sad place and thought, oh, there's nobody who's gonna help me. And then I just randomly took a chance and asked. And sometimes you really do actually just get the help that you need when you go to the right places for it, I guess. And that's it. Take care. And if you're going through this process, it isn't easy, but you get yourself at the end, which is kind of awesome. You just be patient and kind and understanding of yourself. It's not guaranteed from everyone else, so at least you can give it to yourself, right? Take care. Bye, salty possums. And if this was helpful at all, and you are and/or neurospicy, I highly suggest that you check out the other video I made about my experiences with diagnosis.